There are things you learn to stop noticing when you need to keep going. The way the elevator at Desideri Holdings skips the 3rd floor. The way the partners' corridor smells of coffee and import leather at 7:15 every morning, before anyone with a title has arrived. The way my name, Emily Simpson, 31 years old, appears on exactly 0 doors in this building, and on exactly 1 laminated desk placard in the administrative pool on the 6th floor. And that is the full geographic range of my existence inside 42 floors of glass and polished stone. I have been a secretary here for 3 years. I am good at it. I manage 4 senior associates' calendars without error, draft correspondence in 3 registers depending on who needs to sign it, and once located a misfiled acquisition contract at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday because no one else knew the document management system well enough to know where it would have gone when it went wrong. No one promoted me for that. Someone thanked me by email. The 42nd floor belongs to the Commendatore. I have never been above 31. What I know of that floor is this. When he arrives, the building changes register. Security tightens by 1 degree, conversations in the corridor lower by half a volume, and the senior associates check their cuffs in the elevator mirrors. I have observed this 14 times in 3 years without ever being in the same room as the man who causes it. I keep going because of Noah. My son is 7 years old. He has dark eyes and a gap between his front teeth, and he has been living with an anomalous coronary artery since he was 4 days old, when the neonatal cardiologist sat across from me in a room that smelled of recycled air and told me what the imaging showed. Manageable, she said then. Monitorable. The kind of condition that could be watched, adjusted around, kept from becoming catastrophic, until the window opened for the corrective surgery, which was specialist work, which was not covered under my current insurance tier, which cost $177,000. I had been counting toward that number for 3 years. The last 8 months had been different. St. Clement's Community Church, 4 blocks from my apartment, the place I had started attending because Noah asked why we didn't go anywhere on Sundays, had organized a formal medical fundraising campaign. Conrad Pallister had run it. Conrad was the church's fundraising coordinator, a deacon in the volunteer sense, a man with a graying beard and a laminated name badge, and a genuinely warm handshake, who had sat across from me at the fellowship hall table and said, with complete apparent sincerity, that the community took care of its own. He had set up the dedicated fund account. He had managed the donations. He had sent the monthly statements, account ending 4471, PDF file named Noah Simpson Fund Oct Statement, PDF, and had stood at the front of the congregation 6 weeks ago and announced that Noah's surgery fund had reached its target. $177,000. Exactly. Noah had been there, in the 3rd pew, in his good shirt, clapping without knowing why. I had cried in the car on the way home. The surgery was scheduled. The hospital's billing department had the transfer authorization on file. There was nothing to worry about. Tonight I was walking home in the beginning of an October rain, light but insistent, the kind that soaks through before you register it. Bag over one shoulder, phone in my coat pocket, moving through the amber blur of wet streetlights. At the corner of Clement and Marsh, under the overhang of the dry cleaner's awning, I stopped to check my phone the way I always did. Reflex. The same reflex that had kept every calendar and every filing protocol in order for 3 years. A new email. Time-stamped 5:53 p.m. The subject line read, Noah Simpson Fund, account 4471, October statement. I pressed my wet thumb to the screen. The glass fogged slightly from the cold. The PDF loaded slowly, white resolving into columns, columns into numbers, the phone warm against my rain-chilled hand. The current balance field read, $0. I stood under the dry cleaner's awning for 4 minutes without moving. The rain continued. The PDF stayed open on my screen. The columns, the account number ending 4471, the transaction history I had not yet scrolled to, and the current balance field reading 0.20 in the same font and the same size as every previous statement, as if the amount were unremarkable. as if 0 were a number a children's surgery fund could arrive at by ordinary means. I scrolled. The transaction history showed one entry. October 14th, outgoing wire transfer, $177,000. Reference, SCCF Admin 1014, authorized signatory, C. Pallister. October 14th was 4 days ago. I read the entry 3 times. The reference code, SCCF, St. Clement's Community Fund, followed by admin and the date, was formatted exactly like every administrative notation Conrad had used in 8 months of statements. It looked official. It looked routine. It looked like exactly the kind of entry a fundraising coordinator might generate when dispersing funds to a medical billing department. Except the hospital's billing department had not received the transfer. I knew this because I had confirmed the authorization with them on October 12th, 2 days before this entry, and the billing coordinator had told me the funds were not yet showing and to call back when the transfer cleared. I had been planning to call back tomorrow. I called Conrad instead. The phone rang 6 times. Voicemail. His recorded voice, warm, unhurried, the voice of a man who had stood at a pulpit and asked a congregation to trust him with a child's life, said he was unavailable and to leave a message. I did not leave a message. I called the bank. The automated system confirmed the account balance. $0. The wire transfer had cleared on October 14th at 2:47 p.m. The receiving account was registered to an entity called Pallister Administrative Services, LLC. I stood in the rain. I had moved out from under the awning without noticing, and thought about a man with a laminated name badge and a warm handshake and 8 months of monthly statements, and the very specific patience required to build trust for the sole purpose of waiting until the number was large enough. $177,000. Noah's surgery window was 6 weeks from today. I called my sister Diana from the corner. She was 28 and worked in accounts receivable for a logistics company and had the particular quality of remaining functional when things went wrong in proportion to how wrong they had gone. She answered on the second ring. Something happened, I said. I told her. She was silent through all of it. The PDF, the transaction entry, the reference code, the Pallister Administrative Services, LLC. When I finished, she said, "Don't call him again. Don't go to the church tonight. Go home and send me the PDF." Diana. "Send me the PDF," she said. "I'm going to look at the entity registration. Give me an hour." I went home. I forwarded the statement. I sat at my kitchen table with my coat still on, and Noah's drawings taped to the refrigerator in my peripheral vision. A rocket, a dog, something that might have been a hospital, because he had seen enough of them to know they were significant. And waited. Diana called back in 47 minutes. Pallister Administrative Services, LLC was registered in this state 14 months ago, she said. Single member. Conrad Pallister. Registered agent address is a mailbox service on Whitmore Street, not a physical office. The stated business purpose is charitable fundraising consulting. A pause. He registered the entity 2 months before he approached St. Clement's about running your campaign. I pressed my hand flat on the kitchen table. He built the structure before he found the target, I said. Yes, she said. This wasn't opportunistic. He planned it. How do I get the money back? A silence that held more than it said. The wire cleared 4 days ago. The receiving account, I can't see where it went from there. That's not public information. Another pause. Rebecca, you need someone with access I don't have. I stayed on the table for a long moment. I know, I said. The next morning I arrived at Desideri Holdings at 7:08, 4 minutes later than my usual, and sat at my desk in the administrative pool on the 6th floor and opened the calendar management system with the same automatic competence I brought to every morning, because the work still existed whether or not my son's surgery fund had been emptied the previous afternoon. I managed 4 senior associates' schedules. I drafted 2 letters. I redirected a misdirected contract amendment to the correct signatory chain. At 9:15, I received a calendar notification I had not generated. A meeting request flagged as administrative, no subject line, 10 a.m., 42nd floor. The 42nd floor. I had never received a meeting request from the 42nd floor. In 3 years, no one in the administrative pool had, as far as I knew. The requests that came down from that floor went to department heads and senior counsel, not to the pool, not to the laminated desk placard on 6. The request had been sent by a name I recognized only from the building directory. M. Carver, Executive Administration, Desideri Holdings. I accepted it and spent the next 43 minutes completing my morning work with the particular focus of someone who has decided that whatever is coming, they will arrive at it with everything in order. The 42nd floor smelled different from the rest of the building. Not better exactly. More deliberate. The carpet was darker, the lighting lower and more directed. The kind of environment that had been designed to communicate that decisions made here carried a different weight than decisions made elsewhere. The reception desk was staffed by a woman in her 40s who looked at me with the professional neutrality of someone who had been trained to receive anyone without registering surprise. "Emily Simpson," I said. "I have a 10 o'clock with M." "Carver." "She's expecting you," the woman said. "Through the glass doors, second left." Monsieur Carver was a compact woman in her early 50s, with reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the organized energy of someone who managed complexity as a default state. Her office was orderly. 3 screens, a filing system that looked used rather than decorative, a single framed photograph turned slightly away from visitor sightlines. She looked at me when I came in and said, "Close the door." I closed it. "Sit down, Miss Simpson." I sat. She folded her hands on the desk. "You've been with the company 3 years. Yes. Your performance record is clean. Better than clean. You've been flagged twice for commendation by the associates you support, and once by the document management team after the Hargreaves contract recovery." She said this without inflection, as though reading from a file she had already memorized. "You've never asked for anything beyond your standard compensation review." I said nothing. I did not know where this was going, and I had learned, in 3 years of managing other people's calendars, that the most useful thing you could do when you didn't know where something was going was to stay still and let it arrive. "The Commendatore is aware of your situation," she said. The room held. "My situation," I said. "Noah's Surgery Fund, St. Clement's Community Church, Conrad Pallister." She opened a folder on her desk, physical, not digital, and turned it toward me. "We became aware yesterday evening." I looked at the folder. Inside was a printed copy of the fund statement, the same PDF I had opened in the rain on the corner of Clement and Marsh, the same transaction entry, the same 0. "How?" I said. "St. Clement's Community Church holds its banking through First Meridian," she said. "First Meridian's commercial division has a relationship with this office. When a wire transfer of that size moved through a charitable account to a single-member LLC, it generated an automated flag." She paused. "Our compliance team reviewed it at 7 this morning. The Commendatore reviewed it at 8. I looked at the folder. "He reviewed it personally," I said. "He reviews everything that carries his flag," she said. "That is not unusual." A pause that was shorter than it felt. "What is unusual is that one of his own employees appears in the documentation as the victim." The word landed with a precision I had not expected. Not affected party. Not involved individual. Victim. "I need to understand what you're telling me," I said. "I'm telling you that you have an appointment at 2 p.m. today," she said. "Same floor, the Commendatore's office. He wants to hear it from you directly." She closed the folder and slid it across the desk. "Bring everything you have. The statement. Your bank's confirmation. Any correspondence with Pallister." She stood, which meant the meeting was over. I stood. I picked up the folder. At the door I paused. "Why?" I said. "Not the appointment. I understood the appointment. The other thing. The flag." The 8 a.m. review. The word victim from a woman who chose words with evident precision. She looked at me. The Commendatore has a code, she said. Part of that code is that people who work in this building are not left to manage certain things alone. She picked up her glasses. That's all I can tell you. I went back to the 6th floor and sat at my desk and drafted a letter and redirected a filing request and managed a calendar conflict between 2 senior associates who needed the same conference room at the same time, and I did all of it with the same steady competence I brought to every morning. At 1:50 p.m., I took the elevator to 42 for the second time that day. The Commendatore's office occupied the northeast corner of the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides, the city below, midday gray, the kind of gray that made the glass look like it was holding the weather out by will. A desk of dark wood, clean except for a lamp and an open folder. Bookshelves along one wall, ordered. 2 chairs across from the desk. He was standing at the window when I was shown in. I had seen him 14 times in 3 years. Always at a distance. Always in motion. What distance had given me was outline. Tall, controlled, a quality of sustained attention that altered the register of any room he moved through. What this room gave me was the rest of it. He turned. The full, careful attention he directed at me was not the glance of a man performing due diligence. It was the look of someone who had already read the file and was now reading the person. "Miss Simpson," he said. "Sir," I said. "Sit down." I sat. He moved from the window to the edge of the desk, not behind it, at it. The lamp threw the near side of his face into light and left the rest in the room's gray. "Tell me about Conrad Pallister," he said. "From the beginning." I told him. 8 months, start to finish. The fellowship hall meeting, the account setup, the monthly statements, the congregational announcement, the October 14th wire transfer to Pallister Administrative Services, LLC, my sister Diana's entity search, the mailbox address on Whitmore Street, the registration date 14 months ago. I was specific and sequential, the way I drafted correspondence, in the register that required no editorializing because the facts, arranged correctly, said everything themselves. He listened without moving. When I finished, he said, "The receiving account. Do you have a routing number?" "The statement shows the wire destination reference only," I said. "SCCF admin 1014. I don't have the receiving account's full details." He looked at the folder on his desk. My fund statement, I understood, a copy of the same one Carver had shown me. "The LLC registration," he said. "Pallister Administrative Services. Your sister located it." 14 months ago, I said. 2 months before he approached the church. He was quiet for 4 seconds. "He built the structure before he selected the target. That's what Diana said." "Your sister is correct." He looked at me. "This is not a man who acted on opportunity. He selected St. Clement's, built credibility over 8 months, and executed when the number was large enough to justify the exit." A pause. "He has done this before." The room held that sentence. "You know him," I said. "I know the pattern," he said. "The entity registration, the charitable framing, the single-member LLC with a mailbox address, this is a practice structure, not improvised." He set the folder down. "My compliance team is pulling his registration history across 3 states. We'll have it by end of day." I looked at him. What does that mean for Noah's surgery? He held my eyes. Something moved in his expression. Not the controlled assessment. Something underneath it. Brief, contained, present. "The window," he said. "How long?" 6 weeks, I said. "The surgeon's slot is protected for 6 weeks. After that, the next available operating window is 14 months out." I paused. "His condition doesn't allow for 14 months. A silence. Outside the windows, the city moved through its gray afternoon, indifferent and usual. "We'll recover the funds," he said. not a reassurance. A statement with the quality of a decision that had already been made. He could have moved the money anywhere, I said. International transfer, cash, a second LLC. Yes, he said, which is why we moved today. He stood, the meeting-shifting register, from assessment to action. I need 2 things from you. First, a signed statement of the full account history and your correspondence with Pallister. Carver's office will take it this afternoon. He looked at me directly. Second, I need you to continue as if you don't know what we're doing. Go to the church. Behave normally. If Pallister contacts you, respond briefly and without urgency. Do not signal that this office is involved. I understood the mechanics of that. I had spent 3 years being invisible in this building. I knew how to perform unremarkable. All right, I said. He nodded once. I stood and walked to the door. Miss Simpson. I stopped. Noah, he said. How old? 7, I said. He looked at the window, the city. Something in his jaw, a held thing, controlled before it became visible. 7 weeks ago, I had a situation with my own son, he said. Low, not for the room. Different circumstances, same feeling. He did not elaborate. I did not ask him to. Thank you, I said. I went back to the 6th floor. I drafted the signed statement. I sent it to Carver's office at 3:40 p.m. and went back to managing 4 senior associates' calendars for the remainder of the afternoon, and I did it with the steadiness I always brought to work that needed doing. At 5 p.m., I called Diana. Something is moving, I said. I can't tell you more than that yet. A pause. Is it real? I thought about a man at a window. A jaw held tight for 1 second. Same feeling. Yes, I said. It's real. Conrad called at 6:47 that evening. I was at the kitchen table with Noah's dinner dishes still in front of me. He had eaten, asked 3 questions about whether rockets could go through rain, and been put to bed at 6:30 with the particular efficiency of a working mother who loves her child and needs the next 2 hours to think clearly. I looked at Conrad's name on my screen for 2 full rings. Then I answered. Emily. Warm. Unhurried. The voice of a man with no particular reason to be calling anyway. I wanted to check in. I know the billing department was expecting the transfer confirmation this week. I've been trying to reach them, I said. My voice was level. 3 years of managing other people's difficult conversations had given me a register I could access on demand. Professional, neutral, neither warm nor closed. I haven't been able to get through. These hospital billing departments, he said, and I heard the particular quality of a man filling space, creating texture where there was nothing, the social equivalent of a hand waving in front of your eyes, while the other hand moved somewhere else. I'll follow up directly. I have a contact there. Don't worry. I appreciate that, I said. How is Noah doing? The question landed the way he intended it to, with the warmth of a man who remembered details, who cared, who was the kind of person a community trusted with its most important things. He's good, I said. He had a good week. That's wonderful, Conrad said. That's just wonderful. I'll be in touch about the billing office. You focus on him. He hung up. I set the phone face down on the table and sat in the kitchen with the specific stillness of a woman performing calm for no audience and finding it harder than usual. He had called to take the temperature, to hear whether I knew, whether panic was in my voice, whether the zero balance had landed yet. He had heard nothing that alarmed him, because I had given him nothing, and he would now calibrate his next move based on the assumption that he had more time than he did. I picked the phone back up and sent a single message to Carver's direct line, which she had included at the bottom of her business card that afternoon. Pallister called at 6:47 p.m. I told him I was trying to reach the billing department. He offered to follow up with his contact there. No other information given. Her reply came in 8 minutes. Noted. Do not call the billing department. We are handling that contact directly. Behave as normal tomorrow. I put the phone down. Behave as normal. I went to Noah's doorway and stood in the dark, listening to him breathe. The even rhythm of a 7-year-old who had gone to sleep confident that morning would arrive, and that the person responsible for his world had it managed. He had a cardiology follow-up in 11 days. He had a surgeon who had protected a slot for 6 more weeks. He had a mother who had been counting toward a number for 3 years, and had watched it disappear in a PDF on a rain-wet phone screen, and had spent the following 24 hours performing ordinary in 3 different registers for 3 different audiences. I pressed my hand against the door frame. I was good at invisible. I had made a practice of it, refined it into a professional tool, used it in 42 floors of glass and polished stone for 3 years without complaint, but I had never needed it to hold this much at once. The 6th floor would be waiting tomorrow at 7:15. The corridor smell, the laminated desk placard, the 4 calendars, the letter drafts, the filing protocols, the work that existed whether or not anything else did. I would be there. I would be unremarkable. I would give Conrad Pallister nothing in my voice or my manner that suggested anything other than a woman waiting on a billing confirmation. And somewhere above me, on the 42nd floor, a man who had reviewed a flagged compliance report at 8 in the morning and used the word today as though it were a guarantee rather than an intention, was doing something with the structure of a single-member LLC and a mailbox address on Whitmore Street. I did not know yet what that something was. I was learning, slowly, that in this building, in this particular orbit of competence and code and controlled intensity, something had a way of becoming enough. I went to bed. I did not sleep well. But I had not slept well in 3 years, and I knew the difference between the kind of sleeplessness that meant nothing was moving and the kind that meant something was. This was the second kind. The compliance report was on my desk at 7:49 a.m. Not a digital file, a physical envelope, interoffice, no sender name, only the floor number in the upper left corner printed in the building's standard font. 42. I looked at it for 3 seconds. Then I opened it. Conrad Pallister, born 1961, had operated charitable fundraising structures in 4 states over 11 years. The LLC names changed. The causes changed. A Veterans Memorial Fund in 2015. A pediatric literacy initiative in 2018. A disaster relief campaign in 2021. The structure did not change. A single-member LLC registered 2 to 4 months before target selection. A mailbox address. A stated business purpose of charitable consulting. A period of credibility building that ran between 6 and 14 months. A single wire transfer timed to coincide with peak fund balance. A clean exit. 3 of the 4 campaigns had never been reported to law enforcement. The families and congregations who had been defrauded had absorbed the loss in silence, because the amounts, while devastating at the personal level, had not crossed the threshold that made prosecution feel achievable, because they had been embarrassed, because they had not had the particular resources that made pursuing a man across 3 states and 4 LLCs feel like a fight worth starting. The 4th, a community fund in Macon, Georgia in 2019, had resulted in a civil suit that Pallister had settled out of court for 22 cents on the dollar under a confidentiality agreement. $47,000 had been raised for a family whose daughter needed experimental cancer treatment. Pallister had taken the full amount. The settlement had returned $10,400. The girl had been 9. I read the file twice. Then I set it flat on my desk and completed my morning. The calendars, the letters, a contract routing correction that had been sitting in my queue since yesterday, and I did not look at the envelope again. At 10:20, a new calendar notification arrived. 11 Sanro a.m., 42F, Carver M. No subject. Carver was standing when I arrived. A man I did not recognize was seated to her left, mid-40s, a face that had the specific quality of belonging to a person who spent significant time in rooms where the information moved faster than the conversation. He had no nameplate, no introduction, and a notepad with 2 lines already written on it. "You received the file," Carver said. "Yes." "The Commendatore wants you present for the next step," she said. "Not as a participant, as a witness to the record." I nodded. "Pallister has a meeting at 2 p.m. today," she said. "He doesn't know the subject. He received a call this morning from a representative of a charitable giving consortium, a body he has been attempting to affiliate with for the past 3 months, because legitimate institutional affiliation is how he establishes credibility for the next campaign." She paused. "The consortium representative offered him an in-person intake meeting. He accepted immediately." "The consortium representative," I said. "Works for this office," she said. "Yes." The man with the notepad looked at it without writing anything. "The meeting will take place here," Carver said. "Third floor conference suite. At 2:15, when he believes the intake meeting is concluding, the Commendatore will enter. At that point, you will be observing from the adjacent room via closed circuit." She looked at me steadily. "You are there because you are the injured party, and because the Commendatore believes the injured party should see what resolution looks like in practice." A pause that held weight. "He is specific about that." I thought about the file on my desk. The girl in Macon, the 9 years old, and the $10,400. "He's done this 4 times before," I said. "At minimum," the man with the notepad said. First words. A voice that matched the face, precise, unhurried. "We believe there are 2 additional campaigns that predate our documentation range, 2009 and 2011, different states. We're still building those records." "What does he want?" I said. "Not Conrad. The Commendatore." Carver looked at me. "He wants the money back," she said. "All of it, with the terms of its return to be determined in the room this afternoon." She let that sit for a moment. "He also wants Pallister to understand the alternative clearly enough that he chooses the money." I understood the structure of that sentence. What is the alternative? "Everything the compliance team has assembled goes to the appropriate law enforcement bodies," she said. 4 states, 6 campaigns, the settlement agreement that was supposed to be confidential, and the Macon Fund. She paused. "The Macon Fund is the one that changes the calculation. The girl was 9. The family has never stopped looking for a path forward on that case. This office has the resources to give them one." The room was quiet for a moment. 2 p.m., I said. 2 p.m., she confirmed. "Be on the 3rd floor at 1:45. Someone will take you to the observation room." She picked up her glasses. "Dress as you would for any afternoon in the office. You are not there to be seen." I went back to the 6th floor. I ate lunch at my desk, the sandwich I had packed the night before, because the night before I had known that today would require the kind of stability that skipping meals did not support. I answered 3 emails. I resolved a scheduling conflict involving a deposition and a board call that had been booked into the same 90-minute window by 2 associates who did not communicate with each other. At 1:30 p.m., I straightened my desk. At 1:43 p.m., I took the elevator to 3. The observation room was smaller than I expected. A narrow space behind a one-way glass panel, 2 chairs, a single monitor showing the same feed from a different angle. The man with the notepad from Carver's office was already there. He indicated the chair closer to the glass and said nothing else. The conference suite on the other side of the panel was set for an intake meeting. A round table, 4 chairs, a presentation folder at each position, a carafe of water with 2 glasses. The institutional staging of a professional encounter. Nothing that would signal anything other than what Pallister had been told to expect. He arrived at 1:58. I had not seen him in 12 days. He looked the same as he always looked. The pressed shirt, the lanyard with the laminated badge from St. Clement's Community Church, the posture of a man comfortable in rooms where he was the most trusted person present. He shook hands with the consortium representative, a woman in her 30s with a leather portfolio and the precise warmth of someone performing a specific function, and took the seat facing the window. He poured himself water. He was at ease. Whatever red he had taken from our phone call the previous evening had settled him. He was a man in the middle of an intake meeting for a consortium affiliation he had been cultivating for 3 months, and he had no reason to be anything other than ready. The representative opened her portfolio. "We appreciate you making the time," she said. "Before we begin the formal intake, I want to confirm the scope of your current campaigns. You're running the St. Clement's Surgical Fund currently?" "That's right," Conrad said. 8 months in. We're in the disbursement phase now, working with the hospital billing office on fund transfer. The ease in his voice was complete. No seam. "Wonderful," she said. "And the fund balance at disbursement?" $177,000, he said. "Strong community response." She wrote something in the portfolio. The door opened. Conrad did not look up immediately. The sound registered as the arrival of another consortium staff member. Routine. Expected. He was still looking at the representative when the register of the room shifted. That particular shift that happens when the most significant person in a space has entered it. He felt it before he processed it. I watched him feel it. A stillness in the shoulders. A recalibration, the body reading the environment before the mind caught up. He looked up. The Commendatore crossed to the table and sat. Not across from Conrad, but to his right, close. The geometry of the seating now something other than what it had been. The representative closed her portfolio with the quiet finality of a woman whose function in this room had just concluded. She left. The door closed. Conrad looked at the man beside him. I watched his face move through several things in rapid sequence. Recognition without context, social calibration, the particular alertness of a man whose instincts were good, and whose instincts were now telling him something he did not yet want to name. "Mr. Pallister," the Commendatore said. "I'm sorry, I wasn't told you'd be." "No," he said. "You weren't." A silence that Conrad did not fill. The instincts were winning. The Commendatore placed a folder on the table. He opened it and turned it toward Conrad without urgency. The same movement Carver had used with me the previous morning. The patient gesture of someone who had prepared the information and could afford to let it land at its own speed. Conrad looked at the folder. I watched him read. The ease left his face in stages, which was more instructive than if it had left all at once. First the shoulders, then the jaw. Then something around the eyes. Not panic, not yet, but the collapse of the particular performance that requires confidence in your own invisibility. "Where did you?" he started. 4 states, the Commendatore said. 11 years, 6 campaigns that we can document with certainty, and 2 additional that we're currently building records for. He turned a page in the folder. Macon, Georgia, 2019. The family has been looking for a path forward for 6 years. This office can give it to them. He turned another page. The confidentiality agreement you signed in settlement does not hold under the conditions of the documentation we've assembled. Your attorney will confirm this. Conrad's hand on the table was completely still. He had the discipline of a practiced man, but his face had stopped performing. "What do you want?" he said. $177,000, the Commendatore said. "Returned in full to the St. Clement's Community Fund account by 9 a.m. tomorrow. The receiving transfer details will be provided before you leave this room." He paused. "Additionally, Pallister Administrative Services LLC will be dissolved within 30 days. Documentation to be filed in this office's receipt. You will resign from St. Clement's Community Church today. I will draft the language of your resignation. You will sign it before you leave this building." Conrad's voice, when it came, had lost its warmth and found something underneath. Harder, flatter. And in exchange. "This office does not initiate referrals to law enforcement," the Commendatore said. "The Macon family's independent options remain their own. We cannot and would not restrict those. But we do not add our documentation to their case. A pause. You're not law enforcement, Conrad said. No, the Commendatore said. I'm not. You can't compel me to. I'm not compelling you. The voice was even. I'm telling you the structure of two available outcomes and allowing you to choose between them. A pause with full weight in it. But I'll be precise with you. If you leave this room without agreeing, the referral goes out before you reach the ground floor. And the resources I can direct toward a prosecution are not resources you can match. The room held. Conrad looked at the folder. The girl in Macon was 9 years old in the documentation. She would be 15 now. I thought about that from the other side of the glass. The 6 years of that family carrying a thing this man had put down and walked away from. The transfer details, Conrad said. The Commendatore reached into the folder and produced a single printed card. He set it on the table. Conrad picked it up. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he set it down and said, I'll need access to my phone. Of course, the Commendatore said. He stood, moved to the window, and stood with his back to Conrad while the transfer was initiated, the deliberate courtesy of a man who understood the mechanics of allowing someone to choose correctly without an audience for the choosing. I watched Conrad's hands on his phone. 12 minutes. The compliance man beside me was watching the monitor, which showed a banking confirmation interface. At minute 14, he wrote one line on his notepad and turned it toward me without speaking. Transfer confirmed. Received. I pressed my hand flat on my knee. On the other side of the glass, the Commendatore turned back to the room. Conrad Pallister signed the resignation letter at 3:41 p.m. I did not watch that part. The compliance man had walked me out of the observation room when the transfer confirmed, quietly, efficiently, the way this floor moved through all its functions, and I had been directed to a small waiting room 2 doors down with a glass of water and the specific suspension of a person who has just watched something conclude and has not yet located the feeling that belongs to it. The water was cold. The chair was good. Outside the window, the city continued its gray Thursday. At 3:52, the door opened. The Commendatore came in alone. He had his jacket on still, the meeting's formality not yet shed, and he crossed to the window and stood with his hands in his pockets, looking at the same city I had been looking at. And for a moment we were simply 2 people in a small room with a view. It's done, he said. I know, I said. The transfer confirmed at... I know when it confirmed, he said. Not sharp. Just precise. The clarification of a man who meant the other thing. The resignation. Conrad walking out. The door to St. Clement's closing behind a man with a laminated badge and 8 months of practiced warmth. It's done, he said again, with a different weight. I set down the glass of water. Thank you, I said. He turned from the window. He looked at me with the same quality he had brought to our first meeting, the full attention, the reading of the person rather than the file. But something in it had shifted register. The assessment was still there. Underneath it was something else. Something that had entered the room when he had said 7 weeks ago I had a situation with my own son, and had not entirely left. The fund balance will be confirmed to your account by 9 a.m., he said. The hospital billing office has already received a call from this office. Your authorization for disbursement stands. Noah's surgical slot is protected. I heard all of it. I sat with the specificity of it. The call already made, the slot already confirmed, the administrative machinery of this floor having moved through a complete action while I watched from the other side of a glass panel. You called the hospital, I said. Carver did, he said. At 2 p.m. Before the meeting started. A pause. The outcome of the meeting was not in question, but the hospital call did not need to wait for it. I looked at him. You were certain he would agree? Yes, he said. How? He was quiet for a moment. Not evasive, something more like the particular pause of a man deciding how much of his methodology to make visible. Men like Pallister build structures that require continued operation, he said. The LLC, the consortium affiliation, the next campaign already being shaped in the background. Everything depends on not being seen. The moment they are fully seen, the full record, the full scope, the full cost of refusal, they do not fight. Fighting requires believing you can still control the outcome. He looked at me. I removed that belief before I sat down. The room was quiet. "The girl in Macon," I said. Something moved in his jaw. "Yes. Is the family, will they?" "That's their decision," he said. "We've made the documentation available to them. What they do with it is theirs." A pause. "But they will no longer be doing it without resources." I thought about the 9 years old in the file. 15 now. I thought about the mother who had absorbed $10,400 in a confidentiality agreement and 6 years of looking for a path forward and what it meant that a path now existed. "How does someone become what he is?" I said. Not a question I expected answered. More the kind of thing that comes out when you've been holding a file in your hands for 6 hours. "Slowly," the Commendatore said, and then by deciding the slowness was permission. A moment passed between that sentence and the next thing. "I should go," I said. "Noah's pickup is at 5. "Of course." He moved from the window, the room shifting back into its practical register. At the door he paused, and I had the sense that the pause was deliberate, calibrated to something he had already decided to say. "Your work on the 6th floor," he said. 3 years, the Hargreaves contract recovery, the commendations. He looked at me evenly. "There's a position opening in executive administration. Carver will send you the details. You are not obligated. I want that stated clearly, but the work you do deserves a different floor." I stood very still. "That's not why you helped," I said. "The fund." "No," he said immediately. "It is not." His voice had the quality of a man who found the clarification important. The fund is the fund. The position is the position. They don't trade against each other. I held his eyes for a moment. "I'll read the details," I said. He nodded once. I walked out. The elevator was empty going down. I watched the floor numbers descend, 42, 30, 18, 6, and thought about the specific weight of a day that had moved through a compliance envelope and a one-way glass panel and a banking confirmation and a cold glass of water, and arrived, at 4:15 p.m. on a Thursday, at the thing I had not let myself think about directly since October 14th. Noah would have his surgery. The slot was protected. The funds were returning. The billing office had already been called. I walked out of the elevator onto the 6th floor. I sat at my desk. I had 40 minutes before pickup and a calendar conflict that still needed resolving, and I resolved it. And then I sat for a moment with my hands in my lap and let the day finish arriving. At 4:58, I put my coat on. On the way out, I passed the building directory by the lobby, the 42nd floor listings. Carver, M., Executive Administration. Below it, in the same font, Desideri, A., Principal. A. I had not known the first name. I walked out into the city's gray evening, and Noah's school was 4 blocks away, and the evening was cold, and I walked toward it with the particular lightness of a woman who has been carrying something very heavy for a long time and has, today, been allowed to set part of it down. The days after were quiet in the way that days are quiet when the thing that was generating noise has been removed. The fund balance restored to the St. Clement's account on Friday morning at 8:51, 8 minutes before the deadline. And I received the bank notification at my desk with my coat still on and my first coffee untouched, and I read the amount and set the phone down and drank the coffee and opened the calendar system and began the morning. The work was the same work it had always been. It felt different in the way that the same room feels different when the window has been opened. Diana called at noon. I told her the amount, the timeline, the status of Noah's surgical authorization. She was silent for longer than she was usually silent. "Who?" she said finally. "My employer," I said. Another silence. "Just like that." "Not just like that," I said. "It took the better part of 2 days, and a compliance team, and a man who does not accept outcomes he considers unacceptable." I paused. "But yes. The structure of it from the outside probably looks like just like that." "Is he expecting something?" she said. Not suspicious exactly. Diana had the quality of caring about me in the form of practical questions. "He made a point of separating it from anything else," I said, explicitly. "People do that," she said. "I know," I said. This felt different. She let that sit. Diana knew when I had reached a conclusion about something and when I was still turning it, and she had enough respect for the distinction to leave room for both. "Noah's follow-up is Tuesday," she said. "I know. I'll call you after." Carver sent the position details on Friday afternoon. I read them once that evening at the kitchen table after Noah was in bed, then set the document aside and did not read them again until Sunday morning, because I had learned, over years of making decisions in circumstances that did not allow for uncertainty, that the first reading was for information and the second reading was for the thing underneath the information. The second reading told me several things. The position was real, not constructed, not a courtesy offering with a vague scope and no actual function. It had a reporting structure, a defined portfolio, a salary that was specific rather than negotiated, and a note at the bottom in Carver's formatting that said, "Start date flexible. Transition support from current role will be provided. Questions to my office." It also told me, in the specific language of its scope, that it was a position built for someone who was trusted to be adjacent to sensitive information and to handle it with discretion. The word discretion appeared twice. The word judgment appeared 3 times. I thought about the way Carver had said the Commendatore has a code, the way he had said the injured party should see what resolution looks like in practice, the way he had stood at the window with his back to Conrad during the transfer, the deliberate small courtesy of allowing a man to choose correctly without being watched doing it. I thought about 7 weeks ago I had a situation with my own son. I emailed Carver on Sunday evening. "I have questions about the portfolio scope. Would a brief conversation be possible this week?" She replied in 11 minutes. "Tuesday, 9 a.m., my office. I'll make sure there's time." Noah's cardiology follow-up was Tuesday at 7:30 a.m. The cardiologist was a precise woman named Dr. Osei, who had the quality of delivering information in exactly the register it required. No inflation, no softening that became distortion. She had been Noah's doctor for 14 months. She reviewed the recent monitoring data and said the surgical window remained appropriate, and the current protocol was holding. She said this with the same words she had used at the previous 3 appointments, and I received them the same way I always did, gratefully, practically, with the particular focus of a woman who needed the information to remain true for 6 more weeks. Noah sat on the examination table in a paper gown with a rocket ship drawing on the back. He had produced it from his coat pocket, offered it to Dr. Osei as what he described as a thank you gift, and she had received it with the kind of genuine warmth that cannot be performed. "Will the rocket be going anywhere specific?" she asked him. "Somewhere with no rain," he said. She looked at me over his head with the brief, contained smile of a woman who has spent years in rooms with children and has not become immune to them. I drove Noah to school. I drove back through the gray morning, which had rain in it, and thought about a 7-year-old who had decided that the relevant thing about other planets was their weather. Carver's office at 9 a.m. was the same ordered space. 3 screens, the used filing system, the framed photograph turned away. She had 2 coffees on the desk when I arrived and pushed one toward me, which was a small thing and therefore precise. I asked my questions about the portfolio scope. She answered them without deflection. We spoke for 22 minutes. At the end I said, "I'd like to accept." She nodded as if this were the resolution of an administrative process, rather than a decision I had been turning for 4 days. "I'll send the formal offer this afternoon," she said. "Start date. What works for you?" 3 weeks, I said. 2 weeks notice to the current team, 1 week transition. Done. She made a note. She looked at me across the desk with the measured directness I had come to read as her version of warmth. "You'll report to me on the structural side," she said. "On some matters you will report directly to the Commendatore. You'll understand which is which when the situation arises." "All right," I said. "One more thing," she said. She said it with the slight shift in register that meant she had been deciding when to say it. "He knows you accepted. He asked me to tell him when you did." A pause. I don't usually pass along that kind of information. In this case, it seemed like you should know. I looked at her. "Thank you," I said. I walked out into the corridor and stood for a moment with the weight of that single piece of information. He asked me to tell him when you did. Doing what it was doing. And then I took the elevator back to 6 for the second to last time and finished the morning. My last day on the 6th floor was a Friday. The associates I had supported for 3 years sent a card, a real one, paper, with handwritten lines that had the specific quality of things people mean but rarely say out loud. The document management team brought a cake at 3 p.m. It was chocolate. Someone had written 42nd floor doesn't know what's coming in white frosting in a hand that suggested the writer was an attorney and not a baker. I ate a slice. I laughed at the frosting. I finished the afternoon's work. At 5:15, I cleared my desk placard, returned my access card to the pool administrator, and took the elevator up. Not to 6. For the first time in 3 years, not to 6. The 42nd floor on a Friday evening was different from the 42nd floor at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. The reception desk was unmanned. The corridor lighting had shifted to its after-hours register. Lower, more directed, the building conserving what it didn't need. Carver had left at 4:30. I knew this because she had told me, and because the light under her office door was off. My new desk was in the outer office of executive administration. A real desk, not a pool station. It had a lamp already on it. Someone had placed a single folder in the center. Orientation, Week 1, Carver's formatting. I set my bag down. I read the folder cover to cover. I noted the reporting structure, the access protocols, the 3 standing meetings I would now be responsible for coordinating. I was reading the 3rd page when I heard the elevator. He came down the corridor with his jacket off, the first time I had seen him without it. Shirt, no tie, the particular quality of a man who had been at his desk for several hours past the point when everyone else had left. He was carrying a folder and looking at it, and he didn't see me until he was 8 feet from my desk. He stopped. We looked at each other across the quiet corridor in the after-hours light. "Miss Simpson," he said. "I wanted to read the orientation materials before Monday," I said. A pause. Something in his expression, not surprise exactly. Something more like the small recalibration of a man who had expected the floor to be empty and was adjusting to the fact that it wasn't, and finding the adjustment not unwelcome. "Come in," he said. He nodded toward his office. "There's something in the orientation folder you'll have questions about. We can go through it now." I followed him in. The office at 6 p.m. was the same room and a different room. The city in the windows had shifted from gray afternoon to early dark, the lights below coming up in the particular way that cities have of becoming more themselves after sunset. The lamp on his desk was on. The overhead was not. He sat, behind the desk this time, and opened his own folder. I sat across from him. "Page 4, he said. "The discretionary portfolio." I turned to page 4. It described a category of matters handled directly between my role and his. Sensitive, not routed through department heads, not logged in the standard administrative system. The language was precise without being detailed, which was itself a kind of information. "When something arrives in this category," he said, "you will know it because it will not fit cleanly into any other protocol. Your judgment about how to handle it is what the role requires." He looked at me across the desk. "Not a checklist. Judgment." "All right," I said. "The Hargreaves contract recovery," he said. 3 years ago. Walk me through your thinking." I looked at him. The contract recovery had been an administrative error, a misfiled amendment that had invalidated a signing chain 2 hours before execution. I had caught it, retraced the filing path, located the original, and rebuilt the chain in time. The commendation had noted efficiency and attention to detail. "It wasn't attention to detail," I said. I had seen the original amendment come through my queue 6 weeks earlier, and it had an inconsistency in the signatory order. I noted it then. When the crisis came, I knew where to look, because I had already been looking. He was quiet for a moment. "You noted it 6 weeks before it became relevant. It didn't seem urgent at the time, but it didn't seem right either, and I filed it." "Where?" "Here," I said. I touched my temple. The gesture was instinctive and immediately felt too informal. But he didn't shift register, if anything the opposite. "That's the discretionary portfolio," he said. "In practice. Things that don't seem urgent but don't seem right. Things that have no protocol, because the protocol hasn't been written for them yet." He closed his folder. "That's what I need on this floor." A quiet moment passed. Outside the windows, the city continued its evening, indifferent and usual. "Your son," he said. "Not Noah's surgery, not the fund. Your son." The shift was small and complete. "His follow-up was Tuesday," I said. "Dr. Osi says the window is holding. 5 weeks now." He nodded. Then after a pause that held the quality of a decision. "My son is 9, he said. 7 weeks ago he was in the ICU for 4 days. Viral myocarditis. They did not know for the first 48 hours whether the damage was permanent." The room held that. "Is he—" "He's home," he said. "He's good. The cardiologist uses the word resolved." A pause. I have learned not to need a stronger word than that. I thought about Dr. Osei, and the window is holding, and the specific discipline of receiving good news in the exact register it was given. Not more, not less. "Yes," I said. "Resolved is enough." He looked at me. The full attention again, but the assessment had resolved into something else. Something that had been building since a compliance folder, and a one-way glass panel, and a cold glass of water, and that neither of us was naming yet, and that both of us could feel taking up the precise amount of space the room allowed. "Monday, 7 a.m., he said. "There's a standing review I want you present for from your first day." "I'll be here," I said. I stood. I picked up my folder. At the door I paused. Not because I had planned to, but because the evening and the city and the lamp on his desk and resolved is enough had produced something I wanted to carry out of the room carefully. "Thank you," I said. "For the desk." The lamp was on. He looked at the window. A small thing moved in his expression. Brief, present, contained. "Someone should have turned it on a long time ago," he said. I walked out into the corridor and took the elevator down and stepped into the city's Friday night, and I did not analyze the sentence on the way home. I didn't need to. Noah's surgery was on a Wednesday. 6 weeks and 1 day from the afternoon, I had stood in the rain with a PDF open on my screen and a 0 where a number should have been. The surgical team took him in at 7 a.m., and I sat in the family waiting room on the 4th floor of St. Augustine's with a coffee I didn't drink, and my coat folded on my lap, and the specific stillness of a woman who has done everything that can be done, and has arrived at the part that cannot be managed. At 9:47, my phone lit up with a message from a number I had not saved but recognized. "Thinking of you both today." 3 words and a period and then one more. A. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I typed, "Thank you." And then, because the waiting room was quiet, and Noah was somewhere behind a set of double doors, and the morning had the particular quality of mornings that require honesty. It helps. Knowing someone else knows what this room feels like. The reply came in 2 minutes. It does. I sat in that room for 4 days. You'll be through it faster than it feels. I set the phone face down on my coat. I picked it up again. His name. Your son. A pause longer than the others. Then, Marco. Marco, I typed. That's a good name. He chose it himself. Long story. Something shifted in my chest. A small, warm, involuntary thing. The kind that arrives without permission and leaves you deciding what to do with it. I did not decide anything. I sat in the waiting room and let it be what it was. Dr. Osei came through the double doors at 11:22. She looked at me and said, "It went well. Everything we hoped for. He's in recovery and asking whether the surgeon has ever been to space." I pressed my hand over my mouth for exactly 3 seconds. Then I said, "That's him." She smiled. The real one. The one I had seen over his head in the examination room with the rocket ship drawing. I called Diana. I called Noah's school. I sat back in the waiting room chair and sent a single message. "He's out. It went well. Dr. Osei says everything we hoped for." The reply was immediate. "Good." Then, after a breath, "I'm glad." Then, "Come up when you're ready. No urgency, but come up." I came up on a Thursday, the day after Noah was moved to recovery, and 2 days before he would come home. The 42nd floor at 8 a.m., the standing review, my second week in the role, and the first week that had felt like the role was mine rather than something I was learning to wear. The review finished at 9:15. The others filed out. He stayed. I stayed. The city in the windows was clear for the first time in 2 weeks. Actual light, actual blue, the kind of morning that arrives after a long gray stretch and feels almost argumentative about it. "How is he?" he said. "Asking the nursing staff about rocket propulsion," I said. "They've started bringing him books." Something moved in his expression, the brief warmth, the contained thing that I had been watching surface and be controlled for 3 weeks, and that this morning seemed less controlled than usual. "Marco asked me last night if my work friend's little boy was okay," he said. I told him yes. He said good and went back to his book. Work friend. The 2 words sat in the room between us with more weight than their size. "Is that what I am?" I said. I had not planned to say it. It came with the light and the blue morning, and the specific loosening of a woman who had spent 6 weeks holding a very great deal, and had, in the past 48 hours, been allowed to set most of it down. He looked at me. The full attention. The assessment that had long since finished assessing and become something else. Something that had been living in the geometry of late evenings and threshold pauses, and a lamp already turned on, and someone should have turned it on a long time ago. "No," he said. "That's not what you are." The room held. "This floor has a code," I said. His words, Carver's words. "I need to understand if this..." I stopped. Restarted, because the morning required honesty, and I had arrived here on the back of 6 weeks of precision. "I need to understand if what I think is happening is something you would allow yourself." He was quiet for a long moment. Not the evasive quiet, the kind that belongs to a man choosing the exact true thing. "I have not allowed myself very much," he said, "for a long time." He looked at the window, the city, the actual light. "My son has been asking me for 2 years why I am always at the office. I tell him the work requires it." A pause. "Last week he told me the work should come to dinner sometime." My chest did the involuntary thing again, larger this time. "He sounds like Noah," I said. "Yes," he said. "I noticed that too." He moved from the window. Not to the desk, to where I was standing, the space between us becoming the specific distance of a decision rather than a room. He looked at me with everything in his face that had been controlled and contained and present since a compliance folder and a one-way glass panel and a cold glass of water. "Emily," he said. My name. Not Miss Simpson. The first time. "Alessio," I said. His name. Also the first time. Something settled between us. Not an arrival exactly. More like a recognition. The acknowledgement of a thing that had been true for several weeks and was now, in the morning light, being allowed to be true out loud. He reached out and tucked a loose piece of hair behind my ear. The smallest possible gesture, unhurried, deliberate, and then let his hand rest at my jaw for a moment before dropping it. "Dinner," he said. "Friday. You and Noah, me and Marco. Neutral ground, no office." "Noah will ask Marco about rockets within 4 minutes," I said. "Marco will have opinions," he said. "He always does." I looked at him in the morning light, this man who had built a code and kept it, who had reviewed a compliance flag at 8 a.m. and called it personal, who had stood at a window with his jaw held tight for 1 second and said same feeling. And I thought about invisible and 6 floors and a desk placard and 3 years of being unremarkable in a building that had, without my knowing it, been watching. "Friday," I said. He nodded once. The settled thing between us held. I walked back to my desk and opened the orientation folder to week 2 and began the morning. And the morning was the same morning it had always been, and it was also completely different, and I let it be both. Tell me something in the comments. Which moment hit you the hardest? Was it Emily reading that zero balance in the rain? The observation room when the transfer confirmed? Or the Commendatore saying, "Someone should have turned it on a long time ago"? Drop your answer below, and tell me where in the world you're listening from. I want to know how far Emily's story traveled. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one.